Good afternoon and welcome to Jones & Co. I'm your host, Brian Jones. And today we have two guests on our show. We have Ms. Tanya McCartney. She's the CEO of Bahamas Financial Services Board. And alongside her, we have Kevin Moree. He's the chairman of the Bahamas Financial Services Board, and he's also a partner at McKinney Bancroft & Hughes. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Awesome. So the Bahamas Financial Services Board has been around for a couple of decades. It'd be interesting if you could enlighten our audience as to what is the role of the BFSB.
In a sentence, really, the role of the BFSB is to promote the Bahamian financial services industry. In that involves going internationally, educating other jurisdictions about the opportunities here, and locally we have our members and other stakeholders who we get comments from, and we collaborate with the government in connection with various policies and legislation in order to make sure that we have a productive and innovative financial services industry in the Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So your membership is made up from, I guess, a cross-section of all the different financial services providers, right?
That's right. And I'm always hesitant to do this because I forget certain sects, and I do apologize, but just to give a flavor of it, it includes private banks and trust companies, corporate service providers, accounting and legal services, asset management. Tanya, please step in to include some further ones, but it's a lot.
The insurance sector, we're seeing some fintech operations now becoming members. Just the full gamut, anything that is defined as financial services. The law firms, the accounting firms, they're all eligible to be members of BFSB.
And in terms of your membership, has your membership been growing over the years, or what's it like?
I would say the membership has remained consistent. It's interesting because while we have had, for example, consolidations in the market, we have a lot of new entrants then. Even though there have been consolidations, we still have new members and different types of members coming to the fore.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Interesting. And so I know, having been on the board of Bahamas Financial Services Board, I served for 8 years myself. I know you do a lot with very little resources, right?
Absolutely.
How big is your team these days?
We have a team of 5 on staff, including myself. However, the team's reach is extended because we do our work through committees and working groups. So we have all of our directors chairing working groups or committees focused on immigration, investment funds, fintech, insurance. So we put our directors to work. It's not just us in the office.
Right, and your board of directors is pretty robust as well, right? How many members are sitting on your board?
We can have up to 30 members, but I would say they come from all the various segments of membership that Mr. Chairman referenced, so the lawyers, the accountants, the financial and corporate service providers. But outside of that, all of the professional industry associations, the Bar Association, the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants, the Bahamas Association of Compliance Officers, all of the professional industry associations are eligible to also have representation on the board to ensure that when we speak for industry, it's inclusive, it's diverse, and truly representative of the constituents within the financial services sector.
Right, so your membership is made up of all financial services players, but you engage actively with the regulators as well, right?
We engage actively with the regulators. BFSB is a public-private sector partnership. So we depend on the government to help us through subvention with our marketing efforts. But I would tell you that there is tremendous collaboration between us, that is industry, the regulators, as well as the policymakers. And I believe that is one of the ways that we have ensured that the jurisdiction remains strong and that the sector continues to grow.
And I think if I could just add to that in my view is one of the best things of BFSB. And it has taken time to cultivate those relationships, but the interplay between industry and government regulator is a special place to be in, a place that is needed because there's often a disconnect between industry and the government and policymakers. And BFSB has really, I think, done a great job at filling that gap and filtering the needs of industry and understanding the rationale of government's policy and trying to get everybody on the same page. We don't always agree, but the important thing is to at least understand, and so everybody can appreciate where each party is coming from.
Right.
And when I talk to counterparts, because there are similar organizations or institutions in other jurisdictions, but one of the things that really differentiates us is that collaboration between ourselves and regulators in particular. So we get to influence legislation, we get to have discussions around what the impact might be to business, and like my chairman said, we don't always win, but our input is always considered.
Indeed. So in terms of that the collaboration, it really helps push initiatives forward, doesn't it? Now, what are some of these, I guess, top priorities for the year? I guess you work on a calendar basis. What would be the top priorities you're looking at?
So number one, and this will be a familiar phrase, is ease of doing business.
Sure.
And that's obviously an overarching category. But that really is, I think, going to be the guiding light for many other initiatives. And connected to that is going to be, for example, some issues with the Registrar General's Department. And in particular, we understand it's going to be digitized. So we want to facilitate that process. We would like to understand and perhaps make some recommendations in that process. And this goes back, I think, to what we were saying before about the collaboration. There are many members in BFSB who have gone through in their own businesses a similar process with respect to digitizing documents and the actual logistical needs associated with that. So experience and knowledge can actually be passed on, and to make sure that it's done properly and efficiently. And then obviously stakeholders have an interest in that because that's going to make their life easier and make their clients happier. There's some immigration issues which are really going to be a priority. Trying to make it as easy as possible for individuals who may want to move to the Bahamas. And that is a big portion of our value proposition, which we'll get to later, I'm sure. And trying to not only have a setup here, which is very attractive, but the process that it takes to actually move here, whether it's individually or as a business, is actually as easy as possible. Some other initiatives include the individual tax residency certificate. That's linked, to immigration. That's a high priority item. But all of these, as I said before, to close the loop, relate back to the ease of doing business and allowing industry to do their job as best as they can, and providing them with the resources to enable them to do that and to ultimately satisfy clients, because at the end of the day, that's really what we want to happen and is beneficial to us as a jurisdiction.
And I would add to that, all that Mr. Chairman has outlined affects or impacts perceptions about the jurisdiction, our image, our brand as an international financial center. How easy is it to get an approval? Are you on any list? So tied to all of that, I think a priority has to be ensuring that we continue to maintain our compliance with international standards. And we've done a good job with that. To date, we're not on any blacklists. In December of last year, we were removed from the EU's anti-money laundering list, which took some time, but the implications of being on these lists are quite grave, and it can impact how nimble we are and how we're able to service our clients. And so our reputation and managing that, I believe, remains a key priority for us.
It must always remain a paramount.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of developing, I guess, some more traction in terms of the international environment, do you have any plans on doing any international events? That I know BFSB has done quite a bit of what we call landfalls in the past. Do you have anything on the horizon?
Absolutely. In fact, March, we will have our first on-site, in-person landfall event in New York.
How many years has it been since the last
landfall event would have been in November of 2019, just before the pandemic.
So getting back to normal.
Absolutely. And I think that was Dubai. the popular Dubai, right? We sponsored an event there and we hosted a landfall, and then things shut down. And so we're looking forward to New York. We're partnering with Global Fund Media Group, and we will be hosting a Bahamas Spotlight event where the Minister Alquitas, who has responsibility for financial services, will lead the charge for us. Also participating, indicative of our collaboration with the regulators, will be the Executive Director of the Securities Commission, Ms. Christina Roll. She's going to share the news around our DARE legislation, the digital asset space, and how we're managing that, as well as investment funds. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more. We are actually partnering with the Securities Commission. While it is a regulator and its function is supervisory and not to promote, we need to create a greater awareness about the regulatory framework and what this market has to offer. And so a priority for the commission is market development. And we're working with them, and so we were able to secure a placement for the executive director to present at the Hedge Week U.S. Leadership and Innovation Conference. And she will speak to the digital asset space here in the Bahamas. So yes, we have a calendar. We're looking at doing something in collaboration, perhaps with a trade mission, perhaps in June. Of course, Latin America remains a key market for us, and perhaps we can have you come with us to Brazil again one of these days.
Absolutely.
So yes, and later in the fall, we're looking at doing something in the United Kingdom. So we have a pretty robust schedule in visits, but we also engage virtually as well as in print. And we're able to do this with the support of the government and our members.
Okay, sticking with the theme of international engagement, so apart from the promotion side, are there any other international initiatives that are being dealt with or looked at this time that essentially that we might have to respond to as we often do?
Well, I think it was in the paper today, if I remember correctly, or the AG was just speaking at a lunch seminar in connection with the need to stay ahead of these international initiatives.
Yes.
And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I think number one, we have to understand them, and we have to understand them continuously because they change. And we need to have a seat at the table in order to have some impact on the direction that they're heading, so that we can understand as a jurisdiction what is expected of us. Because that's really, if there are any shortfalls, oftentimes it's due to miscommunication or misunderstanding, and in particular with timelines. Because in order to address some issues, it takes longer than some bodies may want, which results in gray listing or blacklisting. Staying ahead of that is key. And so I think the government, based on what the AG said, intends to do that.
Yeah, and I guess the one initiative that's top of mind, and it's something that's of particular interest to my chairman, has to be the Global Minimum Corporate Tax Initiative. The OECD has promulgated this proposal around a global minimum corporate tax in the region of 15%. The Bahamas government has stated its commitment to implementing it. And so we expect, and we have been engaged by government to the extent that we've been invited to serve on a steering committee to provide industry perspective on what implementation might look like. So that's top of mind for everyone. Yeah.
And that's a perfect example, because it's not anticipated that this is going to be happening in a month, 6 months, or 12 months. But getting ahead of it and getting involved at an early stage, this is really being based on a multilateral agreement, and understanding that on the whole, understanding what it means for us as a jurisdiction. If there are certain things, certain exceptions that are often provided for in these, do we want to take advantage of some of those? And giving yourself the opportunity to get input from industry, to consider it, as the government. I mean, all of that is key. And so the fact that this is happening early on, I think bodes well.
And, people tend to say when we talk about international initiatives, that the goalposts continue to change. Like they're always shifting the goalposts. The reality is, and I stand to be corrected, but my view on this is that we always know about these initiatives, and we know about them a while out. There are some other initiatives on the horizon. They talk about mandatory disclosure for professionals and reporting obligations there. While we've not implemented those rules, other jurisdictions have already implemented them. And so we must know that, okay, it's been done in Europe, it's gonna come. So there is some foreshadowing. Fortunately for us, we have some international financial institutions here, and very often their head offices, it may be in Switzerland, it might be in the United Kingdom, they have to implement those rules years in advance, so we can leverage those experiences as well. So yes, the rules continue to change, but you know, in some respects we get warning.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, to your point, you know, we know it's coming down the pipeline. I think in the past, you know, we've just simply, I guess, decided to kick the can down the road, so to speak. I find this forward-looking, you know, positioning much more refreshing. I
Absolutely.
think it's for the Bahamas as a nimble, as a small jurisdiction, we're nimble enough to respond.
And
right?
you know, you're absolutely correct. And our ability to respond in a timely manner and in a way with minimal impact to industry really is based on that public-private sector collaboration. So in the past, we've been invited to serve on international initiatives working groups where relevant government ministries and their technical advisors, as well as industry, would sit at the table and help to work through some of these issues. I recall, for example, when we were implementing the Common Reporting Standard, automatic exchange of information. Actually, the first stab at the legislation, industry engaged two firms, I won't say which firms, to have a look at the rules and to come up with draft legislation. Obviously, ultimately, the decision was that of the policymakers, but we had industry draft the initial legislation based on precedents that were out there, draft regulations and guidelines, and then we worked through it to ensure that the policy implications were properly considered.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So very, you know, well-rounded approach. Right?
We often, I think, focus on the negative aspect, and it's easy to do that because it's a little disheartening sometimes when you feel as if you're a small fish and things are being forced upon you, and there's some truth to that, I think, but that is just a fact, unfortunately. But there's positive aspects to it, and I like the word that you use, nimble. You know, we've proven that we're nimble. During the pandemic, for one, but in many other instances, specifically in connection with financial services. And I think that, again, seeing what's coming on the horizon at an early stage allows you to turn things into a positive. So, for example, this global corporate minimum tax, it seems to have instigated a review of the overall tax regime in the Bahamas. And not to say that anything's going to change, but the actual review is being done. And, you know, is business license antiquated? Would it be better to move to a corporate tax? What are the pros and what are the cons? Go through the process. The process is important and the process is valuable. I don't know where we would necessarily end up. Another example is substance. A lot of people took the view that that was rammed down our throat. That being said, one of the biggest things about the Bahamas is our location, the beauty of what God has blessed us with. And the requirement of substance, which it really encourages high net worth individuals who would have otherwise just had a company, and that would have been their connection to the Bahamas. It now encourages them to actually come down here and live here, be a part of the community, hire people, use their money towards groceries and other aspects of the economy, which has a multiplier effect. And so that's a positive from it. And I do think that given enough time and ingenuity, there's no international initiatives that we can't, at the very least, turn to a positive for us as a jurisdiction. And remembering also that as long as all other jurisdictions are being held to the same standard, which is an important point, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to waste time on the negative, because I think everybody has to struggle with that.
Right. Then in that sense, if everyone is just a level playing field, then essentially no one's being disadvantaged, right?
Yeah, and then it's about service, it's about product offering. Then you can really compete.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Yes. It brings out the true essence of a competitive industry,
Absolutely.
right?
And we would welcome that, because our service providers in the Bahamas I would not hesitate. I would put them up against any other jurisdiction.
And the ready supply of professionals to support financial services. Unlike some of our competitors, there's a wide supply of attorneys, accountants, other professionals to support servicing of clients. There's infrastructure here in the jurisdiction, the close proximity to the United States. So there are some clear advantages to being in the Bahamas. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. So we're talking about impact on the industry from international initiatives and stuff, but the ones where we had, where we have foresight. Well, we were recently blindsided by the pandemic, right? Kind of caught many firms off guard because they just couldn't function the way they're used to. But I know that there's a few success stories and probably a few lessons that came out of this entire pandemic for financial services. I don't know if you could share some of your experiences that members might have shared.
Well, I'll start and then I'll let the chairman speak to it. Early on, the central bank, I think it may have been in April of 2020, they conducted a survey of its licensees to assess the impact in the initial stage of the pandemic. And the results of that survey indicated that many of the firms were able to leverage their business continuity plans and in many respects didn't skip a beat in servicing their clients. It's a requirement for licensees of the Central Bank and the Securities Commission to have a robust business continuity plan. While we tend to think of risks associated with storms shutting down business, and therefore we had to have plans in place, a pandemic may not have been contemplated, but certainly they were able to leverage those plans. And as a result, financial institutions in the jurisdiction showed tremendous resilience. Now, there were some questions, and the chairman and I grappled with them early on in the pandemic around the requirement, for example, to have a directors meeting here in the Bahamas and how that might impact substance. And we worked through that. I don't know if you want to share what the feedback was that you got and how we dealt with that particular issue.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. And I think, that's an example of an opportunity to explore an aspect of business that otherwise you wouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. And so now you had a situation where directors would generally travel to the Bahamas and hold a board meeting and make the decisions, and the minutes and the file are here, and then they would travel back to their respective jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. During the pandemic, that wasn't possible, and it wasn't by choice. Right. Literally, we'll all remember that there was a moment where no flights, international flights, were coming in. And so in speaking with Tanya, we did speak with the government and try to get clarification on what sort of impact that may have. There was some potential substance impact, mm-hmm. and a clarification notice was issued in recognition of this fact, mm-hmm. that so long as the minutes spoke to the fact that the directors would normally have traveled there, but as a result of the impossibility to travel, mm-hmm. That would suffice in those circumstances. Mm-hmm. And a spin-off of that was that there were a lot of businesses who did not necessarily appreciate the importance of meeting in the relevant jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So it may have just been a practice, and there may have been 2, 3, 4 boards since that practice was put in place. So the current board just thought, oh yeah, we travel to the Bahamas to have board meetings, that's what we do. No, there's actually a very good reason for that, mm-hmm. and it's important for you to know that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that actually allowed a lot of directors and business owners to appreciate that. Mm-hmm. In terms of the pandemic positive things, I think it forced everybody really to up the game in terms of technology, how they use it, both internally and how you deal with clients. Mm-hmm. And so in some personal experiences, I know where you had businesses that had always intended to scan all of their files and to create a cloud storage. And generally, like Tanya said, that was after some instances had happened in the BVI and others related to hurricanes. Mm-hmm. But now we've seen the general importance of it. And so during that time, moves were made and implemented, and practices and procedures to put those in place. And obviously once that's done, it flows through, and then that forever changes the policy. And so now when you have clients who need something, or even internally, You're not digging through a filing cabinet and looking for a piece of paper. It's scanned, you know, it's searchable. You can access it quickly, and it just makes life a lot easier and business a lot more efficient.
Yeah. In addition to that, we had the opportunity through our participation in the Economic Recovery Committee to provide input on, for example, the Bahamas extended stay visa, where persons were encouraged to come here and to stay during the pandemic and live and work, and made it easy, similar to our annual residency program. And I actually had the opportunity to meet someone who said that they were here during the pandemic most recently, and they're in the fintech space, and they said to me they were here at the onset of the pandemic, and then the extended stay visa came about. They ended staying here in the Bahamas for 13 months. And it exposed them to our offering as it relates to financial services, and they're doing more business here. So that was something that came up during the pandemic. But anecdotally speaking to some of my members, productivity and profitability increased actually. I guess everybody was at home. Work was at home, so you got more out of some people, but some of the firms have indicated that they experienced growth from a financial perspective as well.
Tremendous,
Yeah.
right? So a bit ironic, some might think, but the reality is the proof is in the pudding, right? And that obviously I like what you said about the contingency plans. It came into effect, and it proves that regulation actually makes a big difference, right?
Absolutely.
So we'll continue our conversation here in a few minutes after this break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.